Story 1. My name is Jack, and I'm going to tell you about the most terrifying night of my life. It happened back in 2020 when I was working as a server at a small diner called Auntie M's in the town of Fairview. I had been working at Auntie M's for about a year. It was a cute little place with a retro 1950s theme. The walls were lined with black and white photos of old movie stars and vintage Coca-Cola ads. We served classic diner food like burgers, fries, milkshakes, and pie. It wasn't a fancy restaurant by any means, but it had a loyal customer base and a cozy, welcoming atmosphere. I usually worked the closing shift, which meant my official shift ended at 10 o'clock p.m. when we locked up. But I typically stuck around until 11 o'clock to clean and restock for the next day. I didn't mind since I was making decent tips and got along well with the other staff. Plus, I kind of enjoyed having the place to myself at the end of the night. It was peaceful. It started out as a night like any other. I flipped to the open sign to close right 10 o'clock p.m. and locked the front door. There were just a few tables to bus in the back dining area, so I got started on that, carrying tubs of dirty dishes to the kitchen and wiping down the tables and booths. About 10 minutes in, I suddenly heard loud knocking at the front door. I jumped, startled by the sound in the previously silent diner. Looking over, I saw a man peering through the glass door, knocking again. He was middle-aged, average height and build, wearing dark trousers and a plain windbreaker. I walked over and called out, "Sorry sir, we're closed for the night." Thinking he hadn't heard me, I unlocked the door and popped my head out. I said, "We're closed, you'll have to come back tomorrow." He looked at me blankly, then turned and shuffled away without a word. Strange, I thought. Must have had the wrong place. I double-checked the lock and got back to cleaning. The rest of the front of house was done quickly, and I moved to the kitchen to start shutting down appliances. As I was rinsing dishes in the sink, I heard another series of loud knocks up front. I froze, a feeling of dread washing over me. Peering around the corner, I saw the same man back at the front door, knocking forcefully again. I stormed up, anger welling up now. "Sir, I told you twice now that we are CLOSD. I yelled through the door. "Please leave, or I'll have to call the police." The man stared at me, his eyes widening. He looked angry, scared. It was hard to read his expression. After a tense moment, he shoved hard on the door, as if testing the lock, then skulked away into the shadows around the side of the building. My heart was pounding now. I had a terrible gut feeling about this guy. I moved to the front windows and scanned the parking lot and street, looking for any sign of him. He was nowhere to be seen. After watching a few minutes, I decided he must have left for good. Still, I couldn't shake the uneasy, anxious feeling. I just wanted to get out of there. I hurried to grab my things from the break room and shut off the last of the lights in the kitchen. As I came back into the dining area, I heard a tremendous crash come from the back of the building. The man was pounding relentlessly on the back door, the sound of wood violently splintering piercing the quiet. Sheer panic propelled me forward. I ran out of the building, not even glancing back as the pounding continued. Fumbling with my keys, I jumped in my car and locked the doors, breathing heavy. My hands shook as I dialed 911 and reported a break-in at the diner. The dispatcher said officers were on their way. Sitting in the dark parking lot awaiting the police, the terror of the situation finally set in. I felt tears staining my eyes, partially from the intense relief of having escaped unknown danger. The man's bizarre behavior implied he wanted something worse than petty cash or valuables. Who knows what might have happened if I had still been inside when he got in. After what felt like an eternity, flashing petrol lights appeared down the street. I leaped from my car and waved them down. 2 officers approached, and I gave them a full account, my words spilling out in a jumbled rush. They swept the building and surrounding area, but found no one inside or nearby. Inspecting the back door, the severity of the scene became stomach-turning clear. The entire wooden door was smashed in, hanging drunkenly from one hinge. The door frame and molding were badly damaged, with shards of wood littering the ground. It looked like something out of a horror movie, the door clearly having been battered viciously and relentlessly with a heavy blunt object. We surmised the only reason he hadn't succeeded in gaining entry was because of the metal reinforcements on the inside. Other than the rampant destruction to the back door, the diner was untouched. The cash register remained locked, and nothing appeared to be missing, not even the tip jar full of cash on the counter. After confirming I was safe, the police cleared out to continue patrolling the area, but promised to check by periodically through the night. For a long while after getting home, I was still gripped in shock. I replayed the events over and over, a horrific movie reel in my mind. Although it still didn't make sense, I had to accept the muted terror of that night as a random act of violence. Maybe a tweaked-out addict looking for nothing beyond mindless demolition. I never saw the man again, and quit working at the diner soon after. Too many bad memories lingered there. I know I was lucky. So very lucky that my gut instinct told me to run, that the back door was reinforced, that I hadn't delayed or hesitated for even a moment. Luck and instinct saved me from some very grim possibilities. Sometimes your guardian angel speaks to you clearly when you most need to listen. I'm forever grateful I heard mine that night. Still to this day, when I pass an old diner on a quiet back road, I get chills remembering that knocking, that pounding, and most of all, the crucial feeling that told me it was time to go. Story 2. My name is Matt, and I'm going to tell you about one of the scariest nights of my life. For context, this happened back when I was in my mid-20s and working a retail job that had me driving to multiple store locations each night. After working various retail gigs in my early 20s, I took a job with a large pet store chain as a stocker. My role was to drive to all the stores in my region each night, restocking their shelves from the boxes of inventory I'd load up in my van. I'd start around 2 p.m. by picking up the van from the warehouse, then finish stocking the final store around midnight before dropping the van back off. It was long days, often 60 to 70 hours a week with overtime, but I was making good money. I had been at the job for a few months and had the routine down. Load up my van, hit 6 or 7 store locations, then end at the farthest store that stayed open latest. The work could be mindless at times, but I didn't mind working alone and enjoyed cruising town to town in my van. Plus, the overtime pay more than made up for the long, late nights. It was about 11 p.m. on a typical weekday shift, and I was pulling into the last store on my route. It was in a remote shopping plaza with just a couple other businesses, all closed for the night. I parked behind the dark store and unlocked the back door into the stock area. After wheeling in some stacks of boxes on my dolly, I got to unloading. I was maybe 45 minutes into shelving product when I faintly heard an odd thud toward the front of the store. I paused briefly but brushed it off as the building settling or the AC kicking on. But as I worked, moving methodically from aisle to aisle, I kept getting an uneasy feeling. Though I was used to working alone at night, something felt off. About halfway through stocking, a loud cough echoed through the store. I froze. My heartbeat quickened as my mind raced. Was someone here? Why would they be hiding and not announce themselves when I arrived? Fear washed over me as I realized the intentions were clearly sinister. Moving slowly so my footsteps wouldn't be heard, I crept to the back door. Securing it behind me, I rushed to my van and quickly dialed 911 with shaking hands. Just then, the door handle jiggled violently, followed by loud bangs against the metal door. A man's gravelly voice erupted in angry shouts, demanding I open up. My blood ran cold hearing the rage and desperation in his tone. I gave the dispatcher details in hushed tones as the unknown man continued trying to bust down the door. He was spewing graphic threats now, making my skin crawl. I started my van and moved away from the back, not wanting to leave until police arrived. After what felt like an eternity of listening to this madman try to break in, flashing petrol lights appeared in the parking lot. 2 officers entered and emerged minutes later with a handcuffed man in his 40s. He had a large hunting knife in his jacket, but nothing else on him. No bags, tools, or anything to indicate an attempted burglary. I was baffled. Why was this guy hiding in an empty store at night with just a weapon? He clearly had violent intent. but toward what? The police had no leads on his motives or identity. All I could do was be grateful that my instincts kicked in, allowing me to get out unharmed. But the chilling thoughts of what could have happened still haunt me. In the weeks after, I found myself jumping at every little sound when stalking those dark, empty stores at night. I realized I could no longer handle the late nights alone. I put in my notice at the pet store soon after. I needed to preserve my peace of mind. That random, potentially deadly encounter shook me at my core. It highlighted how we take small things like safety and security for granted, when at any time that illusion could be shattered. Perhaps there was no rational motive or explanation for the man's behavior. But I learned sometimes danger presents itself unassumingly, and you simply need to trust your gut. Avoiding a possible deadly confrontation was all that mattered, not the mysterious lack of answers around it. While I'll never know what exactly happened that night, I'm grateful I can share my story as a cautionary tale. Always listen to your instincts, especially when you find yourself isolated or vulnerable. And never hesitate to put your own well-being first in the face of uncertain danger. Your inner voice is there to guide you, as mine did in my darkest hour. Heeding its warning is often the difference between life and potential tragedy. My small act of courage saved me, and you have that same strength within when faced with shadowy fear. Story 3. My name is Alex, and I'm going to tell you about one of the most unnerving experiences I had while working the overnight shift at a fast food restaurant during college. For almost 3 years, I worked overnight at a fast food chain in my college town. I was taking classes part-time and working nights fit my schedule perfectly. Most nights were mundane and uneventful, but every so often strange occurrences would leave me rattled. My manager tried to schedule 2 employees together for the overnight, but sometimes I ended up working alone. I didn't necessarily mind it most of the time, but there was one night in particular where I could have used backup. I typically worked with another college student named Tyler, but he was on vacation for a week, so I was solo for several shifts. The first couple nights were normal. Between midnight and 5 a.m., I get a scattered few drive-through customers coming for snacks or drinks. One night around 2 a.m., after a long lull of no customers, I decided to do some cleaning to pass time. I was tidying up the lobby area when I noticed a car parked directly in front of the entrance, headlights glaring in through the windows. The lobby closed at 9 p.m., so it struck me as odd, but I didn't think much of it. Maybe they were just checking directions. I went back to cleaning when suddenly I got a drive-through call. I greeted the man and took his order for a large soda. When I turned to pour the drink, I saw him pulled up to the window staring into the restaurant lobby. It always made me uncomfortable when people lingered and gawked through the windows. I handed him his drink, he paid quietly, and I thought that was that. As I walked back toward the lobby, I jumped. The man had never driven off and was still there, blatantly staring at me through the glass. I asked politely if he needed anything else. He didn't respond, just kept leering for several agonizing minutes before slowly driving away. Shaken, I stayed by the drive-through window, keeping my headset on just in case. About 10 minutes later, I heard the ding indicating another customer. When I asked for their order, no one answered. Looking at the security monitor, I saw it was the same man from before, parked well behind the ordering box, just lingering. My pulse quickened. I had a terrible feeling about this guy. Moving out of view of the window, I watched the grainy camera image closely. He eventually inched forward quickly, then aggressively banged on the glass when he didn't see me. I stood paralyzed as he peeled out of the drive-through, parking in front of the entrance. My hands trembled as I called 911, watching on the monitor as he ran to the lobby, shaking the locked doors violently. Within minutes, flashing police lights appeared. The man bolted to his car and sped off just as the officers ran in to check on me. I recounted the terrifying encounter, and they reassured me he was gone, and I was safe now. In the following days, I pressed my manager for any updates but never heard if the man was found. I agonized over what would have happened if he got me inside, or if I'd been outside taking the trash out. A chilling sense of vulnerability stayed with me during those solo overnights after. In retrospect, I'm grateful I remained calm enough to stay hidden and contact police quickly. But I often think about how things could have gone horribly wrong. Maybe it was a failed robbery attempt, maybe something more sinister. I'll never know his true motives for targeting me. But the memory of that night remains a cautionary reminder of the hidden dangers we'd rarely consider in mundane settings. Looking back, I realize how vulnerable I was, an unwitting easy target working alone at night. Trust your instincts when something feels amiss, and don't hesitate to protect yourself, even if it feels silly. Police later told me calling right away likely spared me from something far worse. Never ignore that inner voice telling you something is wrong. While I escaped unharmed, the shadows of that night still lurk in my mind, making me hyper-aware of my surroundings, especially when alone. But it also forced me to find courage and resilience I didn't know I had. Darkness reveals much about ourselves if we let it.